former national security and foreign policy advisor to President Trump and noted journalist Ken Timmerman. Great to have you with us, Ken. Always great to talk to you.
Hey, John, having me on. It's a pleasure to see you.
So what do you make of these talks? Jake Sullivan apparently talking with his Russian counterparts to reduce the chances of nuclear engagement. What's your level of confidence that these talks are actually going to bear fruit?
Well, first of all, John, it's absolutely important. It's critical for Jake Sullivan to have these talks, Jake Sullivan or another senior U.S. official. Our listeners may be surprised to hear me say this, but I think to do otherwise would have been geopolitical malpractice. Of course, the national security advisor to the President of the United States should be talking to his Russian counterparts. Obviously, he should be doing that. We clearly don't have that hotline, the red telephone that we used to have in the Cold War days. The situation is far more dangerous even than it was then. I can remember as a child during the Cuban Missile Crisis when we were told to duck and cover at school. We had air raid drills going down into our basement. For a U.S. official, such as the head of the U.S. Strategic Command, to tell Americans that we are on the verge of a nuclear war without hard evidence that that has actually happened is just downright despicable. I think that is a horrible thing to do. It is it's irresponsible, and it's going to make a whole generation of Americans fear. By the way, the same way that kids are afraid of climate change. So this is the kind of thing that they're doing. I'm glad Sullivan talked to his counterparts. I am not glad to see a senior U.S. military official warning of imminent nuclear war.
Yeah, you know, it's an important point you make about Jake Sullivan, because I know a lot of our audience looks at the Biden administration's history of foreign policy, and they might be a little concerned. But as you indicated, this has been such an important part in history from preventing nuclear war with the Russians, the constant communication. You can go back and look at Ronald Reagan's letters to Brezhnev and others. And this is what has prevented us from having this nuclear engagement in the past. Do you think that the Russians understand, and Vladimir Putin specifically understands, what the use of nuclear weapons would mean for him in his future? And apparently there's also, Ken, maybe you can speak to this, some pressure on Putin internally on what to do with nuclear weapons.
Well, the internal pressure is a question of intelligence, to intelligence, and I am glad that our leaders are not telling us what they're hearing from spies, should we be so lucky to have them or so skilled to have them. But it's clear that Putin has got to be under pressure at home. You have those people, demonstrations in the streets, thousands of people. He has rounded up tens of thousands of protesters in Moscow and other cities because he cannot tolerate dissent. I am very worried about this talk of nuclear war. I am worried that Putin has a different calculus than we do about it. He certainly has a different threshold for using nuclear weapons. It is part of strategic doctrine to use nuclear weapons first if they feel that their territorial integrity is at stake. And look at what Putin just did. He just annexed parts of Ukraine into Russian territory. So he's laying the table for a first use of nuclear weapons, and I'm sure that's why Jake Sullivan went to talk to his counterpart in Moscow.
Ken, I also want to talk to you about this admission from the Iranian official that they had supplied these drones. Previously, they said they hadn't. But, what type of retaliation or retribution, should be applied to Iran now by the Biden administration, since they are more or less an active participant in this war on Ukraine?
Well, I write an awful lot about Iran in my new book, and the rest is history. Tales of hostages, arms dealers, dirty tricks, and spies. And you can always count on the Iranian mullahs to lie. They will lie to your face. They told us that their drones were not in Ukraine. The Ukrainians shot down some of the drones. They had the photographs of them. They could see they matched perfectly what we had seen Iran using against Saudi Arabia, against the United Arab Emirates, and elsewhere. So I'm not surprised to see the Iranians lie. For them now to come out and admit it is kind of interesting. They are in a strategic relationship with Russia. We see this new axis of Russia, Iran, China, very dangerous, something that does not bode well for our future, especially when we have a weak president of the United States. And I don't just mean a doddering old man who's falling down the staircase of Air Force One. I mean a president of the United States who is perceived as weak by our adversaries. That is tremendously dangerous, and it invites adventurism on the other side.
Yes, weakness. We often say this weakness is provocative. Ken Timmerman,
That's right.
Go out and check out his new book, and the rest is history. Great to see you, and great to talk to you as always, Ken.
Thanks so much from the free state of Florida here, John. Thank you.
All right. Well, I miss Florida. I'll get back.